In 1997, I thought I had it all figured out. I had big plans. And then most of the time when we make plans, God simply laughed. I was graduating from Boardman High School near the top of my class on my way to study at John Carroll University in Cleveland. There I was going to study political science, and then it was off to Georgetown Law, working in the Capitol, and then soon I would be moving into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, making good on a promise that I told anybody who would listen as early as third grade that this guy, Brian Sinchak, would one day be President of the United States of America. Today, I stand before you a very different type of president. I am president of John F. Kennedy Catholic School in Warren, Ohio. Rest assured, the irony of being a president of a school named after an American president is not lost on me. So where did my big political plan go astray? It went down a different path because of the unexpected. Between my freshman and sophomore years at John Carroll University, I traveled to Duran, Ecuador. On a bit of a dare, I might add. My wife, Mandy, lovingly refers to me as high maintenance, and my friends never thought I would be able to survive 2 weeks of volunteer service in a third world. So they challenged me to do it. And knowing my personality, I couldn't back down from the challenge. I rationalized to myself, well, 2 weeks is a lot shorter than the Peace Corps someday. It would look great on that Georgetown Law School application and a future political career. And so I foolishly and bravely accepted the challenge, and off I went to South America. It wasn't long after stepping off the plane in Guayaquil that I encountered the grinding and abject poverty that so embraces the third world. It shook me to my core. It made me question global economics, human rights, and political power. It shook my faith. But it was this moment that changed my life forever. One day, our group was visiting a school, and I entered a very overcrowded schoolroom, and in the back, there was a long, dusty, dirty bench. I went to sit back down on that bench because I was exhausted from the work of the day, and no sooner did I sit than a little boy quietly crawled up onto my lap and just stared at me. This unnamed little boy and I just looked at each other. We didn't speak because of the language barrier, and I can assure you that I've never been more grateful for not being able to speak. Because if I had the ability to speak, I wouldn't have had the words. What would I have said to this little boy? This little boy without shoes, without adequate access to water and food, this little boy without hope. And so we just stared at each other for what seemed to be an eternity. And then slowly he closed his eyes and fell asleep in my arms. I was a 19-year-old young man, and I didn't know what was happening, but instinctually something rose up in me, and I began to rock back and forth. And I ended up singing the only children's song I knew at the time, ironically, a song that I would later sing to my own son, Nathan. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. When it was time for the group to go, I had to leave that little boy on the bench, sleeping in the back of his classroom, and walk away. And I can tell you that walking away was the most difficult thing that I've ever had to do. I walked away and I was angry. I was angry at a world that would allow some children to live and learn like this. I was angry at myself for not being able to magically fix it. And I was angry and guilty that I had so much more than this little boy ever would. And I vowed that day that I would never walk away from the uncomfortable realities of the world. And in fact, I would walk towards them and help to lead others there as well. So that unnamed little boy in the back of that overcrowded classroom touched my heart and changed my life forever. And so I returned to the States to friends who were shocked at my survival, to an academic advisor who was dumbfounded over my change of major, and to a family that was in complete denial over my newfound passion. I remember one morning talking to my mom and my grandma, telling them about my plans. My mom starts crying, and my grandmother spits out her coffee across the kitchen table. They couldn't understand how I would forego law school and the White House for education and the schoolhouse. But I believed then, just as passionately as I do today, that the real political change makers of the world are the educators. Educators who have the ability to shape the minds, form the hearts, and guide the hands of the next generation of leaders. I agreed with Nelson Mandela when he claimed that education is the best weapon that we can use to change the world. It's been now over a decade since I've began my career in education, and my educational philosophy has evolved over those years. Fundamentally, I always believed that schools needed to do things differently than what they always have done. We had to do something different today than we've done 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But even my understanding of educational innovation evolved. I began my career as a passionate advocate for the fine and performing arts. I believed that our classrooms needed to be vibrant places of creativity. So I advocated for increased funding of the arts. Then I became obsessed with curriculum design. I figured that creativity needed to have a context. Under research-based best practices, our lesson plans had to be exceptional, and we had to scour the globe for the best textbooks to put in the hands of our teachers and our students. And then the technology revolution seized my imagination, and I, along with the rest of the world, became addicted to Apple. In fact, at John F. Kennedy Catholic School today, all incoming freshmen receive their own personalized iPads to supplement and enhance their educational experience through high school. But I now realize that although these educational strategies are very important, none compares to the real educational innovation our schools need. That innovation is the passport. I believe that educational travel and service learning is what our schools really need to reclaim our educational excellence. That's when learning comes to life. That's when students can apply the knowledge to the service of the world and the service of each other. That's when learning is both relevant and done in relationship with one another. As a classroom teacher and administrator, I believe that every student should have a passport, whether it's virtual or real, because it's their ticket to an education that truly matters. Because you see, for too many young people today, the academic study of classic subjects of literature, math, and science simply are not relevant to their lives. That's how they perceive it. And they don't understand what relevance it has to their world. Educational travel and service learning provides that relevance and that relationship. Every student should have to discover worlds unlike their own. And so educational innovation is not going back to the traditional 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic and increased standardized tests. Real educational innovation is when we're able to create relevance for our students and in cooperative learning experiences in relationship to one another. I believe that's educational travel and service learning. As that classroom teacher and administrator, I've facilitated short-term immersion experiences, both near to home and very far away, as near to us as local downtown soup kitchens and the Appalachian region of our country, and to faraway places such as Ecuador, Kenya, and this coming summer, India. Students must encounter a world unlike their own. The true test of educational innovation is how we experience the world. And my very first travel with students was to the place that first touched my heart, Ecuador. Here, students participated in the Rostro de Cristo program. We visited schools, orphanages, and soup kitchens, and St. Damien House. St. Damien House is a home and hospital for patients struggling with Hansen's disease. You may know it as leprosy. Here, my students met the beautiful Ecuadorian woman, Trinidad. Trinidad has been abandoned by her family due to the disease that has ravaged her body. Here at St. Damien House, my students sang with her, danced with her, hugged her, and kissed her. All of a sudden, that disease that we read about on the Centers for Disease Control website and we hear about in Scripture no longer is a concept, but it's a person and a story. Whether my students were playing dominoes with patients or simply talking to them, my students like Megan realized that medicine is more than just the biology and chemistry and statistics that we find in textbooks. It is above all personal and relevant to our lives and relevant to the world. You know, we hear so often about finding our passion, right? Hell, there are whole sections of Barnes & Noble dedicated to books helping us find our passion, right? I believe that our schools need to be incubators, if you will, of creating opportunities for our students to find their voice and to find their passion. And I believe educational travel and service learning accomplishes just that. I can't agree more than with St. Augustine, who once wrote that the world is a book, and those who do not travel read but one page. This past summer, I also had the opportunity to travel to Kenya, Africa, and the beautiful Masai Mara with my students and my staff. Here was an amazing experience. I got to witness the connection of my students with the Kenyan students and the Kenyan community. During evening lessons on social justice and evening prayer activities, our students reflected that they never felt more alive than they did in the service of others. And they realized, many for the first time, the importance of their education, that no matter what they chose to do in this life, they had to be able to give back to a world that has so richly blessed them. To whom much is given, much is certainly expected. We also rolled up our sleeves and worked hard. Believe me when I tell you that watching me with a pickaxe is a comedy show in and of itself. I am much better at a chalkboard or a keyboard than holding a pickaxe. But when I was working alongside my students building a school with the Free the Children organization in Kenya, something magical happened. A realization that true learning happens when teachers and students partner together and work cooperatively towards solving a problem. We enjoyed our time working, and as evidenced here by this beautiful picture, here is a veteran math teacher from our school, Barb Rapinski, truly exceptional, working alongside senior student Krista Watson. Their mission? They somehow had to figure out how to remove rocks from over 7 tons of sand that we needed to use for the building of the school. Their innovative solution: take an old bag of concrete mix, poke holes in it, and then be able to sift out the rocks, right? They spent hours under the blistering Kenyan sun working on this project side by side. I believe our schools could be more like this experience in Kenya, where teachers and students work together towards solving a problem and giving back to the world, rather than 8 hours of teachers teaching at students. We also had the profound experience of being able to join the mamas of Kenya on their daily water walk. Do you know in Kenya, mothers and young girls travel up to 2 miles a day with jerry cans to fill those jerry cans with water and then to walk with those cans strapped to their heads back to their homes and villages because they don't have access to clean water. Those cans weigh up to 40 pounds. We attempted to make the same journey that the mamas make every day. I can tell you that it was one of the most brutally exhaustive physical experiences of my life. But even more so, it was emotionally devastating for me to realize with every step I took that girls as young as 12 years old are making this trip multiple times a day, therefore not accessing education. One of my students, Anna McHugh, was so moved by the experience in Kenya that she decided that everybody had to have the experience of walking with water. So we came back to Kennedy. She fundraised money for jerry cans, very much like the ones we used in Kenya. And we gathered 125 teachers, parents, and students on a Sunday afternoon in Warren, Ohio, and we walked for 2 miles with 40 pounds of water strapped to our heads, increasing the awareness of global water shortage and raising important funds for clean water programs throughout the world. We also had the benefit of welcoming 2 Maasai warriors to the event from Kenya who could speak to their culture and to speak about their experience of a lack of access to clean water. You see, in this effort, we brought the world to Warren, Ohio. Not everybody can travel the world, but everybody must encounter the world. It's my belief that this is the educational innovation we so desperately need. Our classrooms must be influenced by the world, and then in turn, our classrooms must influence the world. And then and only then can we learn the important lesson that our world is not the world, and we learn compassion and resilience in the process. It's my hope and prayer, and it is the hope and prayer of my students at Kennedy, that we are the change the world so desperately needs. We will continue to dream as we travel both near to our school and very far away, of a world more passionate about education that really matters. Education that influences the lives of others and gives back to a world so desperately in need. So may all of our journeys be ones that inspire us to care for one another. And may every student begin their educational journey with a passport in hand. Thank you.